Welcome aboard the System 76 transmission log. Our broadcast is about to begin. This is the latest on System 76 computers, manufacturing, and Pop OS. Now for your in-orbit crew.
Thanks for joining us. Today's episode is packed with System 76 updates, and we have 2 guest interviews this episode.
I'm very excited, Emma. I think these interviews are going to be a lot of fun.
We'll have an interview with System 76 founder and CEO Carl Richell, and we have an exclusive interview clip with some of the members of THELIOHEAD.
The hottest topic around the office, basically this entire year, has been the Nebula PC cases and the chassis changes to Thelio. We've made some really cool engineering updates to those products, and that includes things that customers have been asking for a while. We've updated our OSHWA certification now for both Nebula and Thelio, as well as CE certification for a few of the Thelios in the line.
This also means that Thelio, Thelio Mira, and Thelio Major are now going to be able to ship to the same countries as our laptops, over 60 countries, which is huge.
Yeah, it took us a while to get that CE certification, and that's going to be big for getting access to Thelio around the world. These desktops will have improved airflow, better thermals, they'll have top ports like USB-C, USB-A, headphone, and mic jack, and cleaner cables inside so it's easier to move your hands around while you're servicing the desktop.
The top I/O is a nice one.
Yeah, it's been something that people have been asking for a while, and you'd be surprised as to how much engineering work actually goes into adding it to the chassis, because every minor move of one area means a bunch of other adjustments in all other areas of the system. And it's going to be nice for customers to not have to reach around the back of their desktop in order to plug in their mic or connect a mouse or launch keyboard. Now it's right there in front of you, much, much more convenient. And I think people are going to have an easy time with that.
There's a little bit of an aesthetic design change as well. It's sleeker. Where the mountains were, we've added another vent to the air cooling, which is really nice. And there was a lot of testing done to make sure the chassis was optimized for higher-end compute components.
Yeah, when they do the airflow testing, they basically move the fans a few millimeters to test different positions and configurations until they find the one with the most effective airflow. And the extra side intake vent goes a long way to keeping your system cool.
I'm so excited about all these changes. We're really stepping up our game with our desktops. But we can't forget about our laptops.
Yes, the Pangolin laptop also was just updated. So those will now ship with an AMD Ryzen 7 7735U processor.
That's about it for hardware news. Cosmic changes are out of this world this month.
Yes, some epic developments in the cosmic realm. Dynamic settings were added to keyboard and mouse settings, meaning that when a setting's changed, you'll see its effects immediately. You'll just see it live and can keep toggling all over the place. There's a new mode for swapping your tiled windows. So you hold Super X and you just hit the arrow keys and it will show you which window is about to be swapped until you get to the right one. The panel and dock settings have also been implemented. Each of those can be customized to your liking.
Ooh, that means you can change their position on screen, adjust size or opacity, add margins, and see it in either light or dark mode.
Yep. A few other cosmetic improvements include widgets like text inputs, search fields, and inline inputs. And work was also done with symbolic icons like the magnifying glass in search fields. And the desktop environment can make their size and colors more accurate to the theme. You can find more details on that in our latest Cosmic post at blog.system76.com.
Wow, that is a lot of changes for Cosmic. In addition to hardware and software updates, we made a little update to the website as well. We released a sustainability page at system76.com/sustainability, where we highlight how we reduce, reuse, recycle, and replenish components to preserve the environment. That's it for the news this month. The interview for this episode is with System 76 founder and CEO Carl Richell, where he'll discuss what he's been working on and the reasoning behind the newly designed Thelio desktop line.
All right, we are now with Carl Richell, CEO of System 76, and excited to talk to him about the new Thelio line.
So, Carl, what have you been up to lately?
Well, a lot. The new Thelio line is a major improvement for the product line, and it's also been a large project for a lot of our teams, from product engineering to production to marketing and the web development team as well. So, a large project coordinating all the pieces to get us to this new product.
What stirred about the changes?
There's a bit of history. Maybe that would be good to share to talk about how we got here. So about, I think it was 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, AMD came to us and they said, we have this 64 core processor with 128 threads. It's Threadripper, and it doesn't work in Windows. So we need someone to launch this with, because Windows isn't going to be able to get the full performance out of it. And of course, we were excited about that. And they sent us samples, and we had about, I think, 3 weeks. So we got these samples, and they were 280 watt processors, which means they generated just enormous amounts of heat that the processors that were coming up before them just didn't produce. And we needed to handle that in our thermal system, or in our Thelio system. And so we got to work on that, and it was a couple of weeks of really long nights, but we developed a few innovations that didn't require the case getting any bigger. It meant the volume on the desk could stay the same, but we were able to fully cool that 280 watt processor without any throttling. And the way we did it was, originally the design had cool air coming in from the bottom, and the cool air was shared amongst the GPUs and CPUs. To improve upon that, we separated the CPU cooling and the GPU cooling. So now there was a separate channel for CPU cooling with its own cool air intake, and the GPUs had their own cool air intake. So it kind of started with that a few years ago, and that first came to Thelio Major. But then we wanted to push the envelope further with Thelio Mega. Sometimes when you design products, you want to build something that just to see if you can do it and just to see how much you can do. And that's what Thelio Mega is. It's able to handle over like 1,400 watts of thermal energy, which is a lot for a desktop. But in doing that process and developing that product over 6 to 8 months, we learned a lot about cooling, much more thermal energy than we needed to in previous designs. So what this new Thelio product line does is it takes the innovation that we developed when AMD came to us for the 64-core Threadripper and the innovation we developed to support quad GPUs and Thelio Mega, and applies all of that thermal engineering to the rest of the product line. Now, Thelio, Mira, and Major have separate channels and separate cooling for CPU and GPU, which ultimately resulted in things like the Thelio being able to support the fastest Ryzen 9 processors available. So they used to support up to Ryzen 7. Now it's up to Ryzen 9 in a really small form factor. So it's incredibly dense performance in a small package, thanks to lots of effort and time of designing really efficient thermal systems.
In addition to the cooling, what are some of the other major changes to the line?
A big one is top I/O ports. So for years, our customers have asked for I/O ports. It's actually a little bit more challenging than it seems because the top of our case comes off entirely from the internal. And the reason we designed it that way is because we wanted to make it really easy to service Thelio. So by the top case being one piece and sliding off, you have access to all sides of the desktop to service it. But in doing that, there's not like an attached panel where the I/O could stick through. So what we did with this update is kind of design in a mounting point on the internal for the top I/O, which includes USB-A, headphone in, mic out, and USB-C. So we designed a mounting point for that. And then thanks to, over the years, we've bought a lot of machinery for the factory, and that machinery means we have much tighter tolerances. So now we're able to produce an internal and external that always marries really tightly. And so those ports that are on the internal, when you slide the top on, marry nice and tightly, look really sharp on the top. Also with the thermal cooling and thermal changes, because there's now side vents, many more side vents on the side of the systems, we decided to remove the etching that was on the sides. The look is just much more sleek and much more clean.
Nice. I know you mentioned easier serviceability. How important was the right to repair and the reasoning for the redesign?
It's a considerable part of it, but when we think about right to repair, it's designed into every part of our process. So Thelio was really easy to service before, and that was important to us. We think 10 out of 10 iFixit ratings are one of the coolest things to get, and so we think about what things we would need to do to get that kind of rating from iFixit. We went even further with this design. The biggest change was more fan headers. So there are fan headers throughout the system that make it really easy to service. But besides that, the system itself has just built-in characteristics, makes it easy to add memory, add drives. The drive cage is easily accessible when you take the top off. You just put screws in, and the screws are included on the internals, so there's no separate screw bag that you might hide away somewhere and forget where it's at. Everything's integrated into the chassis. So if you want to add a 2.5-inch drive 3 years down the road, the screws are all there inside the chassis to do so. Adding a GPU is as easy as removing 4 screws, plugging it in, and putting the side brace back on. So it's always important to us. It's something that we think about as being inherent in our design philosophy and our company ethos. I've testified in support of right to repair, and we always support companies and initiatives that are driving for legislation that requires right to repair.
So what challenges did you face during the redesign?
Well, when I think about designing products, everything is just a bunch of different things that you're doing in order. So I don't necessarily think product design is challenging or something particularly challenging. I think of it as a project that's large, and then you take each individual piece and you just try to make it smaller and divide it so it's more approachable. So I guess if I were to think about some of the things that were unique about this, we wanted to make manufacturing more efficient, and that meant removing some. There's a part to the external that's called an extrusion, or there was a part, and the extrusion is what made the curves around the edges of Thelio. What we wanted to do was remove those curves, both for aesthetics, because it created lines that went along the front of the system, but also because assembling the system with those extrusions took a long time for the assembly team. So we redesigned the exterior to use the brake to create those big radiuses, and we bought dies that go into the brake. Brake is basically a large machine that you slide a piece of metal into. A hammer comes down, pushes on the metal, and creates a shape in it. So now we're using a brake to create that shape rather than a separate part. The challenging part with that is that now the extrusions had guides that helped the top slide on. So we needed to reproduce that ability without having those guides, because now it's one piece of metal that comes all the way around and is just formed. So we did some things on the internal, like we added a guide on both sides. We added small spacers on the front. So as the top is put on, it slides. It feels like it stops in the right place and slides down. So I think that was probably one of the unique challenges. One of the constant issues with desktop design is PCI slots. PCI slots were designed 40 years ago now, something like that. And GPUs are now enormous. They weigh 7 pounds sometimes on their own with all the cooling on them. And they're 3 PCI slots tall. PCI slots just haven't evolved as the hardware has evolved, but we still need to support them and make it easy for our customers to add PCI devices or remove them. So with this change, we have new GPU bracing to help better secure graphics cards when they're shipping. We have new PCI slot covers so that it's easier to slide them in and they don't fall when shipping. Just lots of small little improvements like that. This has really been almost a year in the works, and so there are tiny little improvements in every area inside of Thelio.
Airflow is a pretty major part of this update, and to my understanding, it's a pretty meticulous process. Do you want to get into just how much work goes into our Airflow changes for this release?
So when we're working on Airflow, one of the first things we do is, we learn a lot with the Omega, as I had mentioned earlier, but that doesn't necessarily apply to the rest of the products because they have different dimensions, they have different number of fans, they have different components in them. And so we theorize about what changes are going to improve the thermal characteristics of the system. And thermal and acoustics are always combined as well, because the more you spin a fan, the louder it is on your desk, and we want to keep that system quiet. So there's a balance between those two. So we start with CFD, which is simulating the thermal energy created by the different components, as well as the amount of cool air, and it's the CFMs that are produced with a fan. And with that simulation, we can knock off maybe 60 or 70% of the different types of cooling arrangements that we might design into a product. Then the next 20 to 30% is all minute details in testing in real time or on the real product. So we'll take that, we'll cut the product, we'll paint it, design it, build it, and then we start doing hands-on testing with that concept. That's where we find that last 20 to 30%, like where the fans should go. Sometimes millimeter differences within the chamber make a difference. Turbulence is a big deal inside of cases. I often see computer cases that have something like 15 fans in them. And as impressive as it might look, what happens with 15 fans is that it creates turbulent air that cannot flow in and out efficiently. And so it just can't cool the system. So fan placement and distance from each other and paths for air, cool air to move from the cool place through the hot place and out and exhaust out is exceptionally important. So that's a bit of the process for us and how we go from kind of concept to simulation to eventually the final product.
And we certainly talk about airflow a lot during this release. I think it's pretty big that it continues to prevent throttling even as the latest components draw so much more power. But people might be wondering, well, if the airflow is so strong, the computers must be really loud, right?
Yeah, and that's the balance. So if you have that system that has 15 fans in it, it's going to be really, really noisy. But there are lots of subtle things. One, that's balancing the right amount of fans as well as developing fan curves that are appropriate for the amount of energy being used. So if the CPU isn't being utilized heavily, but the GPU is, then let's spin the GPU fans. If it's the CPU that's being used, not the GPU, let's use the CPU fans. So we can reduce the number of fans running at higher speeds. Also, just the balance of the overall system by having cool air come in from different places, but without conflicting with each other, then those fans can move at slower RPMs to cool the system. So there's a fan on the bottom and there's a fan on the side, both bringing in separate cool air channels that help with that. The quality of the fans matter a lot. That has to do much more with the motors, somewhat with the blades as well, but a lot with the motors and how quiet the motor is when it's spinning up and down, and a balance with the fan curve. What often doesn't sound good is ramping up the fan really quickly and then cutting it down quickly as well, because it's a jarring sound. So wrapping up smoothly and bringing the fan down smoothly also provides better acoustic experience for customers. Then you can really get into some kind of crazy stuff, like the shape of the vents make a difference. We haven't gotten into that quite as much, but it's something we think about, and that might be another area for us to work on, because right now the sound is high quality, but I do wonder what the shape creates, both the flow of the air coming in as well as causing some acoustic characteristics. So there might be some things that we can do to even push the envelope further by looking at the vent design.
Awesome. What's next for Thelio?
The next thing we're going to do is, so there are a lot of improvements here, like the top I/O, just manufacturing improvements, PCI improvements, different bracing that's improved shipping. Those were applied to Thelio Mira, and Thelio Major. Of course, we have the brand new product, Thelio Spark, that we should probably talk about a bit, but Thelio Mega hasn't received those. So it's Thelio Mega was the inspiration for a lot of the engineering changes that came down to the rest of the line. But now we're going to apply all the things that we did over the course of the last year in Thelio to Mega. So that's probably our first step. We are looking into developing a Thelio miner. That's been a long-standing project we'd like to do. Essentially, that would be a Thelio design that replaces our Meerkat. But we don't have quite a time frame on that yet. It's just in the conceptual phases so far.
So Thelio Spark, it's our new desktop. Talk a little bit more about why it came to be and who it's for.
All right. So Thelio Spark, the Thelio line has always been a professional high-end desktop line. Thelio Spark doesn't really take the high-end part away, but it introduces our products to a new kind of starter class of desktop. One of the things about Thelio line before Spark was that all of the components were exceptionally high-end. If you didn't necessarily need an i7 or i9 processor or Ryzen 7 or Ryzen 9, you'd be getting oversized cooling that wasn't adding any value or performance. You'd be getting a more expensive power supply that didn't add value or performance for a starter desktop. And when you combine these different things, like a very high-end, high-quality case plus unnecessarily oversized components, the cost was too high. It was in the professional class price, but that alienated customers that don't necessarily need that kind of that kind of performance. And that's where Spark comes in. Spark is our desktop that has the same high quality standards that we have across the rest of our product line, but supports up to i5 processors and 4060 graphics cards. So it's essentially like your 1080p gaming machine. It's great for computer labs. It's great for programming, particularly beginning programming, scripting, things like that. It's great for, as I said, 1080p gaming. Great for as a family desktop. Great for as a general purpose business desktop for productivity tasks. It's a new market for us and a new product that I think is much better aligned price-wise for the performance that a lot of customers need that we haven't supplied products for before.
All right. And I don't know if you know this, but we now have a band named after our desktop line. And I'm wondering if you're excited for their new single.
Yeah, I only heard a small cut. So I'm very excited to hear the new song. And I think I'm even more excited about the music video that's coming. I hear it's pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I hear from the band members that it was definitely entertaining to film. So I'm excited for it myself.
Yeah. Do you know what inspired the band?
Yeah, I think they first came about from just the ambition of saying, you know what, we're going to open a factory and start manufacturing our own desktops. And then with that, the continued iteration upon iteration of the desktops to make sure that they're the best product that they can possibly be. And I think there's definitely something inspiring about that. Now, I can't say I've ever heard a song about a specific computer, but I certainly am excited to hear how that turns out.
It just means it's past due.
Precisely.
Oh my gosh. Also, have you seen the THELIOHEAD band page?
Yes, I have, Emma, and it's amazing. The team did a fantastic job making the new Thelio designs come to life. And shout out to Marin in mechanical engineering, as well as all of the build team for such fantastic work on this.
We actually have a clip of THELIOHEAD's interview with the Trolling Stone from when they got interviewed about their upcoming single.
And let's play that clip.
THELIOHEADs, welcome to the Trolling Stone podcast. We are so excited about your upcoming single, Flow. You want to tell the listeners a little bit about that?
We have always been inspired by System 76's engineering, and this time the Thelio desktops, they prevent throttling even in the newest components, and they are the most powerful, and we're very excited to use these systems and just see for ourselves how powerful they are. Flow is about the premium airflow you get in these desktops, and we wanted the sound that matched how much we regard this engineering.
Yeah, totally agree. We also loved the new Thelio Spark. It just released, so that was also a big part of our inspiration.
And just in time for us to get a new bassist.
Oh, our new bassist. He's such a vibe. We absolutely love the bass lines he's providing, and we can't wait for you all to hear them when you hear Flow.
Such a burst of energy to the sound, to the band. We are so lucky to have this talent.
And I think everyone is dying to know, what is next for THELIOHEAD?
Well, I know everyone was wondering. We saw your questions on Insta, but we do have a music video coming out. We just had the best time filming it, and I cannot wait for the world to see it.
There was dancing. It was a blast to film, and we are so excited for you guys to see this.
As a fan of THELIOHEAD's music myself, I can't wait to see it.
I just really think this is gonna, push us to a new level. Like, I'm really imagining world tour. I've always wanted to go to Japan, and I really think Flow is gonna get us there.
That's great. And can we expect any new merch to be coming out with the single?
Lots of new merch. We have crop tops,
Bumper stickers,
sweatpants.
We have pens and pencils.
Lots of stickers, too. We know everybody wants to put a sticker on their new Thelio Spark.
Totally.
I'm going to need all of that when it comes out. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and good luck with the release.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This has been the System 76 transmission log. For more inspiration, check out the website and follow us on social media. On your descent back to Earth, please keep your hands and feet inside the transport beam at all times. Captain sign off, in transmission.